My parents saw me as their safety net, the one who would always be there to catch them. For nearly 7 years, I was the silent partner in their survival, the steady hand that paid their mortgage and erased their debts. I thought that was my role, my duty as the responsible daughter. It took my own daughter, my precious 7-year-old Lily, collapsing on the gymnasium floor for me to realize I wasn't their safety net. I was just the fuel they were burning to keep my brother warm. The phone call from the school nurse was a jolt of pure ice water to the heart. Her words were a jumbled mess of seizure, unresponsive, and ambulance, and they cut through the mundane afternoon haze of my office in downtown Chicago. I was a corporate lawyer, a person paid to be precise and in control, but in that moment, control was a laughable illusion. The world narrowed to a single, desperate objective: get to Lily. I don't remember the drive to Northwestern Memorial Hospital. I'm sure I broke a dozen traffic laws, my hands strangling the steering wheel, my mind a churning vortex of terrifying possibilities. The city I navigated every day became a hostile obstacle course of traffic and noise, standing between me and my child. When I finally skidded into the emergency department, the blast of antiseptic-laced air and the cacophony of quiet suffering was overwhelming. A nurse with tired eyes led me past crying children and worried families to a small bay separated by a thin, pale blue curtain. And there she was, my vibrant, funny, perpetually dancing Lily, looking like a porcelain doll someone had carelessly broken. She was engulfed by the sterile white sheets of the gurney, dwarfed by the machinery that surrounded her. A constellation of wires snaked from her small body to a monitor that beeped out the fragile, rhythmic pulse of my entire world. To see her so still, so vulnerable, was a physical blow. A wave of helplessness washed over me, so powerful I had to brace myself against the wall to keep from collapsing. My husband, Mark, was on his way from his own office across town, but in that initial fog of terror, my instincts screamed for my family. My parents. They lived in the suburbs, a 30-minute drive without traffic. They adored Lily, or so I believed. They were the doting grandparents, the ones who always had cookies and hugs at the ready. With trembling fingers, I typed out a group text to my mom, my dad, and my older brother, Oliver. Lily had a seizure at school. We are in the ER at Northwestern. She's unconscious. Please come. It wasn't a request, it was a plea. I needed my mom. I needed my dad. I watched the clock on the wall, each second stretching into an eternity. 5 minutes. 10. Mark arrived, his face a mask of controlled panic, and we wrapped our arms around each other, a silent, desperate pact of mutual support. We stood vigil over our daughter, whispering reassurances to her, to ourselves. Finally, my phone vibrated. A text from my mom. A breath I didn't realize I was holding escaped in a rush of relief, but it was stolen from my lungs by her message. Oh, sweetie, that sounds awful. We're tied up with Oliver right now. It's a bit of an emergency on his end. He really needs us today. Sending love to little Lily. I stared at the words, my brain refusing to process them. An emergency with Oliver. My 32-year-old brother, a man-child who worked sporadically as a freelance creative, and whose life was a series of self-inflicted, trivial dramas. What emergency could possibly eclipse his niece lying in a hospital bed? Unless he was on fire, there was no acceptable answer. I knew my brother. His emergencies consisted of arguments with his landlord or trouble, assembling a new piece of furniture from crate and barrel. The sheer, stunning selfishness of the message left me breathless. I couldn't even summon the energy to be angry. I just slipped the phone back into my purse, took Mark's hand, and focused on the steady rise and fall of Lily's chest. Hours later, after a blur of doctors and hushed conversations filled with terrifying words like neurology and prognosis, my phone lit up again. It was my mother. For a split second, a foolish, battered part of me hoped it was a message saying they were on their way, that they had come to their senses. I opened it. It was a picture. My brother Oliver was standing in the middle of a sleek, minimalist living room, grinning from ear to ear. My parents flanked him, their arms draped around his shoulders, beaming with pride. The caption read, "Finally got his new place all set up. It looks amazing, doesn't it? He's been so stressed with the move, poor guy." I felt a surge of rage so hot and pure it made my vision swim. Without a word, I handed the phone to Mark. His jaw tightened, and a look of cold, protective fury settled over his features. "Poor guy," he whispered, his voice dripping with a contempt I had never heard from him before. "Our daughter is hooked up to a heart monitor, and they're worried about Oliver being stressed over his new condo." The dam inside me broke. This wasn't just neglect. This was a statement of priorities, a declaration of where their love and concern truly resided. And it wasn't with my daughter. The true moment of severance, the point of no return, came the following morning. Lily was awake and stable, but the doctors were admitting her for a full workup, including an MRI to look for the cause of the seizure. The fear was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I decided, against my better judgment, to call my mother. I would be the bigger person. I would update her, give her a chance to redeem herself, to show even a flicker of grandmotherly concern. She answered with a chipper, sing-song, "Hi, darling," as if I were calling to chat about the weather. The dissonance was jarring. I took a steadying breath and laid out the facts in a calm, even voice. I told her Lily was being admitted, that the doctors were concerned, that it was serious, and that Mark and I were terrified. Her response shattered the last remnants of my illusions. She let out a soft, airy chuckle. A little laugh. "Oh, honey, you know how kids are," she said, her voice laced with a patronizing sweetness that was worse than any insult. "I'm sure it's just a little bug or something. You always were one to worry so much. She'll be just fine." She laughed at the possibility that my daughter had a serious neurological condition. The sound hit me like a physical slap. In that moment, a fundamental connection inside me, a cord woven from a lifetime of love and obligation, snapped. It was a clean, silent break. There was no drama, no shouting, just a sudden, profound emptiness where my devotion used to be. "I have to go," I said, my voice utterly flat. I hung up the phone before she could offer another infuriating platitude. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a newfound, chilling clarity. Now, let me tell you the part of the story I've kept to myself. The part that explains the depth of the betrayal. 7 years ago, my father's small construction business folded during the housing market crash. They had lived their entire lives one paycheck to the next, with zero savings and a mountain of debt. I was just starting to find success in my legal career. So, I stepped in. Quietly, without fanfare, I became their financial guardian. I took over the $1,500 monthly mortgage payment on their house in Naperville. I paid off the loan on their Chevy Suburban. When their credit cards were maxed out, I co-signed for new ones and set up automatic payments from my own account to manage their debt. I did it because I believed that's what family does. You support each other. You don't keep score. But standing in that sterile hospital corridor, my mother's condescending laugh echoing in my ears, I understood. I had been a fool. That evening, after Mark and Lily were both asleep in her hospital room, I drove home to shower and grab a few things. I sat down in my home office, the only light coming from the glow of my laptop screen. My mind was calm, my purpose absolute. I opened my online banking portal. There it was, the recurring transfer for their mortgage. With a single, decisive click, I deleted the payment schedule. Next, the car payment. Click. Canceled. I logged into the accounts for the 3 major credit cards I co-signed for. I navigated to the account settings, found my name, and clicked Remove Authorized User. Revoke financial responsibility. It was a quiet, digital execution of a relationship that was already dead. I felt no rage, no satisfaction, only a hollow, liberating peace. I didn't text them. I didn't call. I simply turned off the faucet. The silence from their end lasted 4 days. 4 days of MRIs, EEG tests, and endless, anxious waiting. 4 days of watching Lily slowly return to her bright, bubbly self. Then, my phone rang. My mother's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again. My father, I answered. His voice was a high-pitched squawk of panic and indignation. "Sarah, what is going on? Your mother's card was just declined at Whole Foods, in front of everyone. And we just got a letter from the bank saying the mortgage is in default. Did you forget to pay the bills?" I let him finish his frantic, entitled tirade. When he finally paused for air, my voice came out cold and steady. "I didn't forget anything, Dad. I have stopped paying your bills. All of them." "What? Why? You can't do that. We rely on that money. You made your priorities very clear last week," I said, the words like shards of glass. "You chose to help Oliver decorate his new condo over being with your granddaughter in the hospital." Mom laughed at her seizure. "So my support is no longer available to people who treat my daughter with such contempt." The line went silent, then exploded. It was my mother who had clearly grabbed the phone. She was sobbing, accusing me of being cruel, of punishing them. She shrieked about how much pressure Oliver was under, how he needed their help, how they had to be there for him. "Good," I said, the word a chip of ice. "Then you can ask Oliver for help. The son you've poured all your time, energy, and sympathy into can now take over your finances. The daughter who paid for your entire life for 7 years gets her child's suffering mocked. The First National Bank of Oliver is now open for business. I'm sure he'll be happy to help." I hung up the phone while she was still sputtering. The guilt I expected to feel never materialized. My entire being was focused on Lily and her recovery. But the story wasn't over. About 2 weeks later, I got a call from my cousin, Jessica. She sounded uncomfortable. "Sarah, I know it's not my place," she began, "but I heard what happened, and you're getting a really raw deal. There's something you don't know about Oliver's move." I steeled myself. Jessica explained that on the day Lily was rushed to the ER, my parents weren't just hanging pictures. They were at a bank, wiring a $75,000 gift to Oliver for the down payment on a luxury condo in Lincoln Park. For months, he had been whining about needing to get on the property ladder. And my parents, determined to give their golden boy a leg up, had scraped together every last cent of their available credit and cash to make it happen. The final piece of the puzzle slotted into place with sickening precision. My financial support hadn't been for their survival. It had been the foundation that allowed them to build a shrine to my brother. I was paying for their house, their car, their food, freeing up their own money and credit so they could lavish it all on him. I had asked for one thing in 7 years, one moment of emotional support, and they were too busy handing my brother the life I had worked so hard to build for myself. But Jessica had one more thing to tell me. She said Oliver and my parents were spinning a tale to the entire extended family. In their version, Lily had merely fainted from dehydration. I was an unstable, hysterical mother using a minor health scare as a pretext to cruelly cut off my loving, elderly parents. They weren't just abandoning my child. They were actively trying to destroy my reputation, to justify their actions. A few nights later, the doorbell rang. It was my father, standing alone on our porch. He looked smaller, older, utterly defeated. A part of me wanted to slam the door, but a colder, more clinical curiosity took over. I let him into the foyer. He wouldn't sit. He just stood there, wringing his hands, mumbling about how he missed Lily and how they'd made a terrible mistake. "Oliver just leans on us so much," he said, his eyes fixed on our hardwood floors. "You were always the strong one, Sarah. You never seemed to need us for anything." Then came the line that I will never forget. We thought you and Mark had it under control at the hospital. We didn't want to be in the way." The pathetic weakness of the excuse was more offensive than any lie. "In the way?" I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "You weren't in the way. You were absent. There is a galaxy of difference between those two things. You weren't thinking about us. You were thinking about him. You always were. Are you really going to keep your daughter from her grandparents over this?" he asked, his voice cracking with self-pity. "I'm not keeping her from anyone," I said, meeting his gaze for the first time. "You made yourselves ghosts in her life. I am just no longer willing to pretend that I can see you." He left without another word. Their attempts to reconnect since then have been transactional and hollow. A birthday card for Lily with a $200 check inside. A text from my mom on Thanksgiving saying she was thinking of us. They are the empty gestures of people who only noticed the well when it finally ran dry. I heard from Jessica that Oliver's condo association fees and property taxes were far more than he'd anticipated. He's struggling. He has never contacted me. That silence is the only kindness he has ever shown me. Mark and I have made a decision. We're moving. We're selling our house and buying a place a few hours away in a new state. We need a clean break, a home not tainted by the memory of betrayal. A place where Lily can grow up surrounded only by people who show up, who prove their love through action, not just words. This ordeal taught me the most painful and valuable lesson of my life. Family is not a title that grants you unconditional access to a person's heart or their bank account. Real family is a verb. It's in the showing up, the holding on, the being there when the world falls apart. I spent years bleeding myself dry for the title of good daughter. Now, I save all my strength, all my love, and all my resources for my real family, my husband and my child. I chose my daughter, and I have never looked back.